Breaking news. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, Christian Coleman, his suspension is being reduced to 18 months instead of 2 years, which means he'll still miss the Olympics, but this time he will be able to compete in the World Championships in Eugene. So I guess that's the compromise here where, hey, take away one of the global championships and not two away from me. He already had the compromise by it being a 2 year instead of 4 because it's not a technical positive doping test. It's just a missed test violation. But I guess he's got to be happy with that result, right? It's better than nothing. He's in the middle of his prime. To not be able to run in back-to-back global champs would be very hard to stay motivated. But now he gets to watch the Olympics from home and see who his competition will be in 2022.
If I'm doing the math right, though, if they held it at 2 years, he would have been back by mid-May 2022. So he would have been okay to compete at the World Champs, but he would not have had much of a runway into that World Championship year. He would have had to done a series of very, very serious time trials to get prepped because, I mean, we don't know the full schedule yet for 2022, but we would assume that those championships would be July, or sorry, the trials, the U.S. championships would be late June, early July. So he would have had a little bit of time to get ready. Yeah, the headline for me here is obviously confirmed that he's missing the Olympics. I want to read the quote that he put out. He says, "While I appreciate that the arbitrators correctly found that I'm a clean athlete, I'm obviously disappointed I'll miss the Olympic Games this summer." He went on to say, "I look forward to representing the United States at both World Championships in 2022, indoors and outdoors." So there you go. The indoor part is now possible, whereas it wasn't. And Coleman's a guy who's had a very successful indoor career. Indoors and outdoors, especially the first ever World Championships held in the United States next summer, where I plan to defend my world title against a new Olympic champion in the 100 meters. Kind of like setting the stage there already, kind of giving a tease there about whoever the new Olympic champion will be, because it's not going to be Usain Bolt. We did an interview with Coleman, if people want to go back and jump in the archives, when this first happened, right? When this suspension, when this news came out of that December missed test that led to all this, he came and talked to us and gave his side of the story. I thought at that point, that there was a chance it would be reduced to maybe 18 months, if he was very fortunate, a year. But the fact that then information came out later about how they had receipts of where he was at the exact times looked more and more like he was going to miss the Olympics. And now we know, from a fan's perspective, you at least get clarity ahead of time. Now, I know it's 2 months before the Olympic trials, but we've been previewing the 100, talking a lot about the 100. There's a great 100 on tap this weekend, and it helps to know for sure who's in and who's out. So those are my feelings right now.
Yeah. Clarity, even though I kind of felt like it was a done deal. I didn't see things getting changed much. But we talked about this is a opportunity now for one and maybe two U.S. 100-meter runners. I mean, two, because there's one athlete who probably wouldn't have made the individual team who's going to now get that third spot. And then there's another athlete who wouldn't have gotten sixth. They would have got seventh because Coleman would have been there. Will now get to be on the relay pool. So Coleman got his start by making the relay pool in 2016, went out of college at Tennessee. So now there's another college kid potentially out there, maybe a Michael Williams, a Terrence Laird, a Matt Bowling, who can kind of sneak in and get that top 6 spot. I feel like we talked about this ad nauseum. I felt like the year of the pandemic was a year of missed tests and cancellations, track meet cancellations. So not sure what else I can add to the conversation except that, hey man, there's consequences to making a mental mistake, which is what he did. He made a mental mistake. I don't think it was on purpose. I think it was just like, hey, what are the odds? It's fine. Maybe he's been able to get away with it by like forgetting to do it by running to a store really quick and no one came knocking. But then there's that one time that they're there and that's how they get you. So he learned his lesson. I'm sure he's now hiring someone to update his whereabouts failures every other minute. So make sure it never happens again.
If you remember, one part of his defense, he was mentioning in previous instances he had received a call, and I'm reading for this NBC article here where it says the panel was also sympathetic to Coleman's assertion that he did not receive a phone call from the drug tester in an attempt to find him. Quote, closer examination of the training material, this is the CAS decision, in fact suggests that the training received by the athlete reinforced the practice of the DCO, doping control officer, placing a call before the expiry of the 60-minute slot. So basically saying the reason he thought that he should get a call is because that's what he
He was getting
learned was
calls.
that he
Yeah.
was getting calls. So this is something in the future that they need to clarify and clean up. Obviously, this is going to be a very high profile example for other athletes to follow, to know that that is not the expectation, that that is not the rule. You can, in fact, get charged with a missed test, even if you do not get a call. But I thought that was an interesting part because that was one of the parts he was mostly pushing back on. Of hey, usually in this scenario, in this situation, I receive a call. But I think once they established that he wasn't there in his residence that day in December, that it was going to be very hard for him to be eligible in time for the Olympics. And just a roller coaster couple of years, almost missed Doha, remember, had to go. And then the case got dropped by USADA because one of the tests got backdated. Just a lot of up and down here. Here's hoping it's 2022, fresh start, and there's not as much back and forth going on here, and he will be part of that U.S. contingent trying to make the team for Eugene in 2022. Because you mentioned he's in the prime of his career. This was his prime Olympics. He had the 2016 games where he made the relay pool. Then this was his prime Olympics, because not everybody has these careers that go on for 5-6 Olympiads like we see some of the superstars. So he's got Eugene 2022. He's got 2023, 2024. Still have some opportunities in front of him, but this is a blow to miss your prime Olympics coming off a world title.
Where do you think this will affect his legacy? Let's assume that he is on fire. He breaks the American record. He wins the next three next three global outdoor 100-meter titles. He's on an American record 4x1 relay that wins a couple titles. He wins a few more 60 world titles. He basically has the perfect career you could have, right? Let's say he ends with 4 100-meter gold global titles and then a couple 4x1s and some 60s.
Yeah.
What do you think this situation will have on his legacy?
Besides from the fact that it's one less gold that he would have, are you talking about just the
idea that he was not allowed? Yeah, he was not allowed to compete.
Yeah, listen, I think people are generally forgiving. There's obviously going to be a constituency out there who's never going to look past this, and they've done that with other athletes before. Of just like, hey, if you serve a suspension, I'm going to look at your career differently from the jump. But I think, generally speaking, fans are able to look past this stuff, to be forgiving, especially if someone shows contrition and moves on from it. So I don't like if he runs out, if he does what you say he does, which will be very hard to do. But if he's able to do that, I think people will still view him as one of the greatest of all time. And it's a tough road to hoe to get to Usain Bolt. But even if he ran in if you ran in the Tokyo Olympics, it was going to be hard to live up to what obviously Bolt did. That would have required something otherworldly. So I think he can get right back in there. He has the opportunity with 22, 23, 24, 25. Four championships right there in a row. If he can go on a sort of run, then absolutely he'll be viewed as one of the best still. I don't think, because it's a missed test, I think people view that differently. And before you get at me in the comments, I understand the issue. I know the reason behind it. I know the history of the sport. But I'm just saying, generally speaking, people view missed tests a lot differently than they view failed tests. It's just the reality.
I wish I knew that when I was in high school. I wish It's better to miss a test than to take it and get an F on it. If
Yeah.
only I
Well,
knew this
what do you
perspective
think?
from.
What do you think about
Uh,
your question?
I don't think it will have an effect. I also think, in a weird way, the pandemic can kind of camouflage it, because when you look back on this like 20 years from now, you'll be like, oh, whoa, like look at that. He had let's talk about the greats. We're like both 80s. Like, all right, Christian Coleman, he had 4 gold medals. It's pretty good. Oh,
Hmm.
what happened in there? Oh yeah, that was the pandemic year. And we might just kind
Hmm.
of forget that it was because of a missed test. I think the sports world has been weird. Kind of everything got shifted and weird, that he might be able to kind of hide behind that. But yeah, like you said, missed test is not the same thing as a failed test. And the more and more you look into it, it was a gotcha. And I get it. You play by the rules, you got to follow the rules. But like in the end of the day, like this is not a situation where he heard a knock on a door and he jumped over a fence, hid underneath a mattress so they couldn't find him, you know? Like, and it just makes me think about like what situation, like in a world, what situation would this have been a way for him? I just can't think of a scenario where him dodging being back like 5 minutes later or whatever, when he was back, would all of a sudden been him going to Chipotle would have been a way for him to flush his system out and be able to have a clean test. Like it wouldn't have happened. Clearly, it was he made a mistake. The doping control people were playing by the rules, no ifs, ands, or buts, and they just the mistake and the no nonsense batted against each other, and now we have no Christian Coleman in the Olympics. So,
Hmm.
congratulations, we proved a point. We are saving
Well,
the sport.
listen. I mean, there has to be some standard. We've talked about this before because
Yeah.
otherwise you have a loophole that you can drive a truck through. So the idea here is that you're available, so that way you can take the test and people know your whereabouts and they have some belief in the performances that you're putting out. Everybody knew the rules going in. Again, the thing with track, that's so difficult is that it seems to be all or nothing. It's either you're disgraced or you're completely clean. And that's because of the history of the sport, which I fully appreciate and understand. But there's no room for just it was a technical screw up. I messed up. I'll do my time. But after that, can you judge me on what comes next? And again, caveat, I understand. I understand why people won't trust the performances because of the history of the sport. And they'll say, well, it happened 3 times. There must be something going on. But there is room for mistakes. You go through, people probably don't realize this. Go through the Wikipedia pages of many famous athletes. There's a lot of people who've had 3-month things, 6-month issues. Now, they may not have been during the Olympics, so you didn't pay attention to them. But there's been a lot of people who have served suspensions of varying lengths who, to answer your question, I don't think is going to go into the recap of their career when they retire. It's just not going to be, it's not going to be part of it because it was one tiny thing throughout the entire course of their career. Now, if you're talking about a 4-year ban, obviously that's in the first or second paragraph of anybody's career. But sitting out 18 months for something, and then if you come back and you're able to, I'm assuming, avail yourself to all the testing from that point forward, and then still run really fast, I think the people who are on the fence might come back to your side because they're seeing enough from you that to believe that you're a clean athlete. But it's just tough. And I understand where you're coming from in terms of like, oh, now everybody thinks, he's doping and because in track there's no misdemeanors. It feels like it's just like either everybody judges you and your entire career because of one mess up, or you're clean. How dare you possibly accuse so and so of doing something that they shouldn't do? But it's just like this stuff comes up frequently. This stuff comes up frequently.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people who scream the loudest are always on their high horse. It makes them feel good to be like, look at us. We are telling the people that this is a bad, bad man. And just, it's like, cool. You got 20 retweets on your tweet. That's awesome. But Christian Coleman's clean. And if I'm wrong, whatever. I don't even care that I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. He's clean and he's going to run fast. He's probably going to win in Eugene, and he'll put up a big middle finger when he crosses the finish line. No, he won't do that. He'll do he does this, doesn't he? Doesn't he do this with his hands
He
when he
did
crosses the finish
that.
line?
Did
Yeah,
that a couple times.
that's what
Yeah,
we do.
I did see that.
He'll do that.
Okay,
But yeah.
little bit
Anyway,
different than the middle finger.
yeah, a little bit different. But
Don't
I'm sure
take
he's
Gordon's
pissed.
advice, Christian. Don't
He's
take
pissed
Gordon's
because
advice.
he's like being taken out on a technicality. Again, a technicality of a rule that he agreed to. Not saying he's 100% not at fault, but cool.
Yeah. Well, because people would say once you're on two, don't even leave it up to chance. Like make sure you take
Yeah.
care of business once you're on two. Again, and I understand that, and we don't know what everybody is doing 24 hours a day, and we will never know. So a lot of this requires just doing the best you can from a drug testing perspective and living with the consequences and knowing that you're not gonna ever have 100% certainty either way.
Hey, I went on a shoot last week. I rented a camera. The
Mm-hmm.
camera was supposed to be returned on a Tuesday morning. I knew about it Monday morning. I got a second reminder from my boss on Monday afternoon, and then I still forgot to hand in the camera. But I'm not fired yet, I guess.
Well, you're not going to Tokyo either.
I'm not going to Tokyo, I guess. But people, even when they have those two things, like we're human, right? We're not like robots or like every day we know to do this. Like sometimes we sleep in, right? Like we have an alarm clock, but we sleep in sometimes. Yeah, but you set your alarm clock. Why didn't you wake up? I don't know. I slept in. You can't. We're human. We're not.
Yeah.
Perfect. So anyway, and I guarantee, like talking to other athletes, a lot of athletes are like, oh yeah, have been times when they screwed up the whereabouts login and then just got lucky because it just happened to be a day where no one was going to knock on their door. Because if you think about the odds are kind of rare, right? There's so many people, 365 days a year. The odds that one in, if you're only getting tested like 8 times in a year, the odds are like 1 in 30, maybe 1 in 40. So it's kind of rolling the dice. It's like roulette.
Athletes do not listen to Gordon. Do not listen to Gordon about how infrequent this could be. Certain athletes, it's definitely higher. I just think you can have a variety of different viewpoints, but one of them would be that, hey, the suspension was warranted because the rule was out there, but also that once he comes back, then that means he's served his time and you can view him from his career moving forward as somebody who has done his time and is trying to do better. Like that's possible too, right? This was just a screw up, did the time, doesn't mean that he was doping, but hey, that was the rule. Now you have to pay the price, pay the consequence for it. It's interesting that this happens right before we have this crazy 100 on deck. I think it's tomorrow in Florida. Did you see this start list with
Noah
Lyles?
Is this the University of Florida meet?
Yeah, University of Florida meet. You have Lyles, Gatlin, DeGrasse, Kyrie King, all in the 100. The 200 is interesting too. You have a meeting in the middle there in the 200 with Fred Curley coming down, Trayvon Brobel moving up. You have Sha'Carri Richardson is running the 200. Tori Bowie is entered in the meet. LaShawn Merritt. It's a who's who, Gordon. It should be a pretty good competition. Your face was shocked when I told you those names in the 100 because you're like, wait a minute, that's like half of the world championship final maybe in one race.
It's basically everyone that's going to make the Olympic team except for Bromell, right? So you can kind of look at that as a litmus test. We're like, all right, this is going to be the order, add in Bromell somewhere. But yeah, I mean, but again, 100's crazy. Anything can happen. You could have a good race one day and a bad race the other day. It's not really 100%. If you win this race, you're guaranteed going to Tokyo. But it's a good litmus test. Yeah, sprint action. Dude, I'm loving. We're getting track